Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a group of Q&As, I believe, that Yoshi-P did with several French media outlets. So I did kind of a video on this already. I covered 3 specific points that I noticed were translated over on @iTechKimochi on Twitter, Audrey, who I reference for interviews all the time. However, we have a much more extensive look at a lot of those topics here, as the full interview was actually translated and posted over on the Final Fantasy XIV discussion Reddit by one Blackmore Knight. I only went looking on the main Reddit to see if there was a full translation, didn't see it. This has been here for 21 hours, so I guess I could have saved us all a lot of time by just doing the one video, but hey, here I am now. Thank you to Blackmore Knight for translating, although it seems he brutalized them with machine translation and then interpreted the results. So I guess still take with this what you will. It is an unofficial translation to a lot of that stuff. So there's actually the post here, and then there's a follow-up post beneath with a whole bunch of different things and a source to the article, which of course I will include in the description, both this and then of course this will have the source for the full article. So first is Yoshi-P acknowledging that some of the 6.x content didn't land despite trying new things because the rewards were not commensurate of the time expected. Thank goodness. That's one of the most important things. Now, obviously, they had to have heard some of that feedback, and they've already been making mention of how by the time we get to 7.3, we'll have approximately 50% more rewards than in that same time frame for 6.0 to 6.3. But to hear that that's the main reason why they're doing this, more artists, more modelers, and it's going to gradually ramp up over 7.1 until 7.3 until we get to that 50% point. So while right now it seems kind of the same, even though I do think they put a little bit more effort in even now, that's going to continue to accelerate over time for the rest of the expansion. 7.4 and 7.5 not being included is still kind of weird to me, but I guess they don't have that pipeline really ready all the way yet. No, it's a little too far ahead. So I probably can talk a little bit more about what they've already kind of nailed down and they know is on the docket for that. Now going to the next question. This one is one I actually commented on in the previous section. We now know that the Exploration Zone series is being aimed for the 7.2 series. Now, I made mention in that video why that's good, but the earlier we get this style of content, the more, I suppose, sated we'll be content-wise throughout the expansion. We don't want to have to wait till 0.35 and 0.45 and 0.55 for some of the most important features, and I would say the Exploration Zones returning after their absence in Endwalker is probably a pretty important thing. There will be some content that has some exploration aspects while also requiring collaboration between players to achieve some goals will be present. It'll have similar rewards to Bozia and Eureka, such as field notes and the like. Field notes, a good thing. That's definitely one of the better bits of Bozia's, that lore, even if towards the end the field notes kind of used to do something that a lot of us don't agree with, but all the same. And I don't mean the bike, I mean how the story kind of ends with the field notes. Now, this next one I thought was really interesting. So Yoshi-P comments about MMO currency and the value that it has. So, and I'm going to just read this paraphrase here. When an MMO currency is too high value, it creates opportunities for outside of game businesses to profit from converting real world currency into game currency or vice versa. Thus, it is in Yoshi-P and his team's best interest to not have Gil be a large equivalent value to real world money. They believe if they have a link to a very large sum of Gil to having character power, then imbalances that they don't want to be there would happen. Gil sync mounts came as a compromise to this to let people flaunt their wealth without it being character power. Other avenues are being inspected too, such as being able to buy a very expensive title for Gil. Not a bad idea, I suppose, but this is a personal note they threw in where how RMT focused 11 is, and let me tell you, as someone who played 11 for many years, who's gone back to it, it is wild how much it is normalized. Like, we know people do it in 14. It's really obvious. But in 11, it's like publicly flaunted and expected that you are either on the selling end of RMT or the buying end of RMT. And the few that aren't, you generally can recognize. It honestly at times almost seems like trying to be free to play in a gacha versus being pay to play. It seems that way. It's not always true, but it's recognizably easy to see. So I get that. That being said, I have 400 million Gil and really feels like I have no value to it. So I feel like there's probably a better balance, and having more of those Gil syncs might be okay. But at the very least, hearing the introspective of why they don't want Gil to be such a powerful tool is interesting, having grown up in the other Final Fantasy MMO. Here they talk about why the cities are split, something they've always kind of done, but it was really, really noticeable with this one. They have a crafter content city and a battle vendor city to keep both cities feeling lively for players that may come later. The primary city is usually the biggest and most welcoming because they want it to feel that way for the initial rush, hence why Tuliolal is much grander than Solution 9 is. All these new cities still lose to Limsa, though, which can be upsetting for the development team. That being said, they do make some comments about the starting cities. Yoshi, for technical reasons, they can only server travel from the 3 starting cities, but they do want to expand that later. That being said, Yoshi-P acknowledges that most other MMOs don't keep their starter cities relevant forever, and it does kind of feel like that in 14, there's always a spot in Limsa or Gridania where people are hanging out. So new players walk into the game, and it feels very alive right away. So they don't want to kill off those cities necessarily and remove everything that makes going back and hanging out to them valuable. Let's be honest, one of the biggest reasons Limbs is popular is because the market board run is half a second. So they really want to make another city popular. I think we know what the formula is. But I do agree with that the starting cities being busy is a really good first impression to the player. Not necessarily shout chat, but the visibility. A little bit more with the visibility of the number of players. But then there's also the contrast of then stepping out into the world and there being far less players. So something a bit more measured would probably be a better middle ground, but it is what it is. They're currently working on the next steps for job levels and what the level cap will be. But then he just does the same thing. Will it be 100? Will they do other methods of advancement like materials? Will the level cap keep going up? But with the character power expanded in other ways beyond new buttons, a lot of jobs at level 100 already feel at their limit. So they do. So do they even add in new buttons? This is just Yoshi-P playing with the crowd, playing with this is a don't expect them to do anything wild. Don't expect them to do anything out of the park. He's just like, these are the kind of questions we're getting and acknowledging those. Do they make another system of making jobs more complex and developed that isn't just adding skills? They're all questions. We've had Yoshi-P pose questions like this, not specific to this topic before, and not amount to anything overly complex or difficult. So no matter what, generally we can expect to start an expansion at one point of power and end the expansion at another. What system they use is kind of irrelevant for that, because what they don't want is for people to be locking you out of raid because you didn't do some like post expansion grind that's just kind of expected of you other than item level. Or if they do, they would probably equalize it. So there's things to consider, but for the most part, don't expect like a merit point system and for you to go in and go fate leveling at max level to try to earn like bonus things for you. I would definitely move expectation and keep expectation away from that. They very much would. Let's be honest, even if they did it, they'd undo it pretty quickly or make it irrelevant in some capacity. Yoshi acknowledges that 14 is played by both occasional gamers and very invested hardcore ones. The latter group might be resistant to change after having learned and mastered the existing rotations and job system presented. I feel like, as a black mage main, as Yoshi-P being a black mage main, I think he might be speaking from the heart on that one. He says that any changes they make or are considered making will hopefully be to the group's liking, though, but that for now he can't say more on future of jobs without revealing too much. It's still in probably very active development. Yeah. No matter what, even if we get job complexity back, we know they're moving towards a little bit more of a unique feeling per job going into 8.0. I still don't expect the core kind of value of what they've built up to this point to change. I personally just don't. I think that even at a slightly more unique aspect, the game's overall flow and feel probably doesn't change very much at all from what it is. You just might stand out individually a bit more, which I think a lot of players, especially hardcore players, do like, even if they have to give up something that they already had. I feel like a lot of, funny him saying this, I think the invested hardcore ones almost want the change more, at least of the players that play jobs in particular at a higher skill level. They want to feel more involved. They're okay with change if it means something that's more engaging. So it's weird that he says resistant to change with that group, because I always feel like it's kind of the people who don't play a lot or people who are kind of in the middle that more so are resistant to the change, because for them it's a bit more of a hill to actually build and learn, and they don't put as much time into it. They don't put as much effort into it because it's a video game at the end of the day. So when something changes and they've kind of taken their time to build and learn and kind of ingrained certain core aspects. When those change, that's actually the group of people that I feel like are more resistant to change than the people at the top. There is definitely trickle down effect to from the most hardcore players thinking things to other players kind of thinking things. It happens with every MMO, unfortunately. But I guess it could be maybe a mix of that even, where there's more people that receive trickle down, so it seems the way that I'm describing it as well. Either way, I just don't expect as significant a change. Like, some people are going really far with their predictions on that, and I'm realistically not. There's some other things. The following are paraphrase translations from Aluna Minori, who translated from 2 other sources that we have. Thanks, Aluna Minori. The team doesn't really like the class job system, has been thinking about starting as jobs for a long time. We know this. This is a rehash. They've been saying they would like to get rid of the class system overall, but cost effort is really not efficient on it. So maybe one day, but it's just so low priority that honestly, I don't expect them to do it unless absolutely necessary. There's also the concern of lore regarding classes becoming jobs, but I don't think that's as hard to get around. I think it is more of a technical limitation of everything being so intertwined by default, and not about being able to say, hey, there are marauders in the lore, and a warrior is, you know, just an evolution of that in some capacity. Yes, are you starting as a warrior? Sure, but you're the warrior of light. Come on. Even if you don't technically start that way, you still kind of do. You know what I mean? The team was surprised at Bakul Jaja's reception regarding sex appeal. Yeah, I read this on Twitter. Audrey also made this quote about how the dev team went, huh? You know the meme with Yoshi-P leaning back in his chair when he was doing the bit with, well, this exact chair, actually. And it's him, like, pretending to sleep, and then he gets up and he looks... Like, actually, the dev team had that exact moment. And that's really funny to me. But either way, that one made me laugh. I saw that one on socials. I also saw on socials they made Graha like tacos because of how much he liked the hamburgers. So he's just kind of the food NPC at this point. They're considering the implementation of systems that would allow for the Lalafell riding a Rugadin. This was Jesse Cox's question that he posed to Yoshi-P. And I got to admit, the paraphrase of this is not great. A checkbox for a large race and then a toggle option for would you like to be rideable? There are certainly better ways to describe that checkbox. Would you like to be rideable? I can tell you the entire community is probably turning that checkbox on, and they'll feel no shame, nor should they, because the answer is generally yes. Anyway, Yoshi acknowledges that dungeons are formulaic, but that the template allows younger staff members to share their designs and share their work quickly. So they're just regurgitating. They're not going to be going crazy on dungeons and trying to make them something more than what they are. No surprise, we do have Criterion and Variant, which they're willing to put more development costs into, and we'll probably continue to see those evolve over time. They're starting their attempts to create a 24-man Savage. So I've seen a few people talking about this quote. However, it is worth noting that this same quote is from when they were talking about the introduction of the new large-scale content, exploration content. So this is very likely more a reference to something along the lines of Delubrum Reginae Savage or Baldessian Arsenal. Now, where some people make note is that this specifically says 24-man Savage, which, notably, Baldessian Arsenal is 56 people, and the Delubrum Reginae Savage is 48. However, a common piece of feedback about Delubrum is that it probably should have been the other way around, where the normal could support up to 48 people because it's kind of just easy content anyway, and the Savage should probably have been 24. That was a not uncommon thing because wrangling 48 players together, especially on launch for Delubrum Savage, you had to have all 48 people. You couldn't queue in with 45 or 43 or 27. Now you can queue in with less. But on launch, you needed all 48 people in the party before you were allowed to go in. That's a pain. So only needing 24 is a much more reasonable thing, which is why, since it was mentioned alongside field operations, exploration content, they are likely referring to a new Delubrum Reginae equivalent and not something like the Crystal Tower or a Final Fantasy XI Raid Savage. Could they do that one day? Sure. Would it actually be Savage? Unlikely. I think they would probably not call it Savage, tone it down name-wise, difficulty-wise. And even then, I have other concerns, but that's a topic for another time. But this is most likely referring to another Delubrum Reginae. Anyway, regarding the start of A Realm Reborn, they wanted players to all just start in one city instead of 3, but that some players have a fondness for the 3-city system. Yeah, that's definitely not a system I would change. Like, I get why you might want to funnel all people in through one zone, but I think they've also seen the downsides of that. We've seen what happens when they force people through a single zone all at the same time. And if all of your new players are doing that, I think even from just a base technological standpoint, if they were to ever have another boom in popularity, that would be the first thing to go. And that's not good. So splitting people up into 3 different zones is probably the better idea when they're first entering the game. And Yoshi-P has to do less hands-on checking than he used to, as other team members can handle that sort of independent thinking now. Good. So you can work on whatever other games CBU3 is working on as well. That's good to hear, though. I mean, can't expect them to do literally everything. Not forever. Like, at some point, the game has to function without him. Like it has to be the case. So that needs to happen right there. That's very important. Now, the interviews don't technically end there. Now, obviously, I have to move this over a little bit because the centering doesn't work exactly the same. But an official translation of one of these sources with a couple of additional questions is here. Now, they say official translation. I guess they just mean not Blackmore Knight's translation, but, you know, like somebody who can actually do it, but not like a Square Enix provided one. Next thing is about set bonuses. So there are no current plans for set bonuses if you complete a full set of equipment, like think of like tier sets or Grand Company sets. Yoshi always conflicted. Says if the game went in a more hardcore direction in the past, maybe they would do it now, but he doesn't want to force players to engage in content they might not want to, not because they want the equipment, but because they want the power set bonus the equipment provides. I'm always mixed. I think there are ways to do set bonuses that are better for the player base. I think, for example, making pieces that are part of a set, not necessarily all come from one thing. For example, you could have set bonus, you can have a set of armor, or even just a set type that has multiple forms of pieces that come from multiple places. So even if you don't like one, you can still kind of work towards a set bonus in multiple locations, but your game has to be built for that. And I don't think 14 is built for that, and they would have to kind of retool things. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I guess I look at the realistic nature of it ever happening, and I don't see it. So I have to kind of temper expectation and whatnot. Maybe one day they'll cave on that. I feel like at some point they have to cave with gear and make it a little bit more involved, a little more interesting, especially because like it's basically the crit show now. Like, you know, other jobs of other considerations, skill speed, spell speed, you know, direct. Like there are other stats, but like it's the crit game. We play the crit game. It's the most important thing. It's been the most important thing for a very long time. And I would like to see that change in some capacity. Sets with just static bonuses run the risk of being more advantageous for one role more than another. So any possible adaptation of this idea would probably be relic armors that you build and tailor for a specific job instead of for developer specified bonuses. Sort of reads to me like stat customizable armor from some content, or another would be most they're interested in exploring. Yeah, something like that's fine. I mean, to be fair, like we already have building stats out for like relic stuff. And making armors that work like our weapon, like, don't get me wrong, again, it's the crit show. Like, it's technically not more interesting. But that's why I like areas like exploration content, because you can do things like this in exploration content, and you can just go buck wild, and it's fine. You just make it only work in the exploration content. That makes that content in particular more interesting to do while you're in it. And that's worked. I mean, even with basic things like elemental bonus in Eureka and haste in Bosia, which not as good, go a long way towards encouraging gear progression within that system and feeling like the power you gain there is very exclusive to that area. It's very visceral and real, even though it's isolated. So I do want them to explore it at the very least in that. But again, I still think that the overall game could, you know, use something that deters us from the crit show. This is the regurgitation of the Beastmaster comment from my other video. Challenging part is making a design that's different from what they did with Blue Mage, but also being different than current jobs. I've seen some people pose some things based on events in the story. I still just think Beastmaster is going to be capturing enemies out in the world, probably specified enemies, new ones that they add and not currently existing ones, and using them to fight, predominantly using them to fight. In Final Fantasy XI, people like to ask, what was Beastmaster like? It was a solo job. And while you could fight alongside your pet and help them kill the enemy that you were fighting, a lot of the times people would sort of recycle enemies. They'd like grab an enemy nearby to like control it, and then they would tell it to fight another enemy. And then when their pet dies, they go and grab another one, and they just kind of, they just like one by one, like put the wildlife, and they stay away. But that's because they were fighting opponents that were much higher level than them. I don't think it'll be quite like that, but I still think the idea of catching wildlife, although in this case, I think it'll be catching it permanently, like adding it to a collection and not like I'm temporarily taking control of it. I still think that it's going to largely be about you sending the pet in and giving the pet commands, and each pet having 4, maybe 5 commands that are unique to it, and the fighting happening like that. I do think changing the pet that you have in combat, I think you having your own life bar is very likely, and things along the like. So you still need to worry about your positioning. You still need to worry about what's being aimed at you and targeted at your pet, keeping it away from the pet. And that is distinctly different. I just think that's the route they're going to go with it. Some people think we're going to transform into beasts. I would have thought that if Beastmaster was a normal job, but not in this way. And they want to keep the distinction between expert and normal dungeons in terms of stress and difficulty. What dungeons have to... Never mind. Yoshi also thinks that once we start getting more gear through the rest of the patch cycle, the current dungeons won't feel... Oh, he's referring to the expert because the expert dungeons, they throw hands at max level. I'm not going to lie. Like, especially the first boss of Strayborough. That dungeon throws hands, man. In some cases, quite literally. They're always open to adding in more gimmicks, mechanics if they feel appropriate for the fight and dungeon, but don't want to overwhelm players either. And also, yeah, the trick for the first boss is don't be greedy. Yeah, I mean, he's right. He's definitely right. I love the new dungeon. So if this is... Okay, I'll say this. If what they mean by this is that dungeons that get added to expert are more like the expert dungeons we have now, but the leveling dungeons, while they may have, you know, some more stress added to them, are still more... They feel like leveling dungeons, like not quite as punishing, quite as pushy. I'm okay with that direction. The dungeons are going to be straightforward and formulaic, and they want to create this tiny distinction, which for experienced players is not that relevant, but noticeable. Good. I think that's for the better, especially with expert eventually going down to 2 dungeons and an expansion. I think you kind of need that. But that covers everything that's in this post about the interviews coming out of Japan Expo and him going through all the French media stuff right now. We're probably going to have some other ones coming up soon. He has the Chinese Fan Festival in a few weeks. And while that is about Dawntrail, sometimes we do get tidbits that are relevant for like stuff we haven't seen yet. So, I mean, Dawntrail is still so fresh that any question is technically a relevant question, as long as it's not about, you know, the base game of Dawntrail, I suppose. But anyway, I just wanted to get this done since I answered some of the questions in the other video, and now I have all of the Q&A and everything. So thank you again to Blackmore Knight for posting this on the Final Fantasy XIV discussion Reddit. Guess I should maybe check that on occasion, since this was the only place I found this and not anywhere else. Again, there's a link in the description of the video, so be sure to give that a look. Go thank them. You can also check out the original source articles, and if you have any sort of translations or anything that you want to add, although obviously there's the official one that's linked below. Either way, just linking all the sources. But anyway, I'm going to get back to my live stream. They've been waiting for me to finish this up. Hopefully they've been enjoying it, since I haven't been paying attention to them at all. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.